Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The FCC has come out and said that they're ready to authorize the final top 10 winner in the RDOF auction. Be right back. Thanks for joining me. Rick Uzzi here with Broadband Deployment News. It's Tuesday, but it's not 3 o'clock, so it's not Tech Tuesday. Tech Tuesday is taking another week off. I'll be back with Tech Tuesday next Tuesday with Jason Young to continue our series on best practices for broadband call centers. So today I thought I'd go ahead and catch up a little bit because Broadband Deployment News has been off for a week for the holidays. So I wanted to talk about this final award coming from the FCC on RDOF. When I say final, I mean in the top 10. So there were, everybody's kind of been tracking the top 10 winners. And Resound Networks was number 8. And actually, they're more like number 6 now because two of the winners, SpaceX and LTD Broadband was actually the top winner. Those two were deemed to be not viable for the auction. Originally, they were told that they had won, but when the FCC looked further into it, they decided for different reasons that LTD Broadband would not be getting any money and that SpaceX, a low Earth orbit satellite provider that you're probably familiar with, they also would not be getting any money. What's interesting is there is a satellite operator that's getting some money in addition to Resound Networks here that we'll see about. So I will go ahead and link to this page at the end of the broadcast. You can see here that you've got the public notice, and that always talks about various things that the FCC took into consideration. And there's the attachments. The attachment A would be a list of winners, and the attachment B would be defaults. So this is the public notice, and again, multi-page document that talks about some things like why they waived certain, for example, certain ETC designations or whatnot from various providers. In this case, I think Resound Networks had a few of those. It talks about what's required for them to move from ready to authorize to authorized, and basically that's just two final steps that these two providers are going to have to do. And one would be they need to get their letter of credit sent in, and then need to have a bankruptcy opinion letter sent in. So you got those two final steps. Once they get those two final things in, then the FCC will be designating them as authorized, and we'll see another announcement on that. I've been covering the ready to authorize. I thought that was more interesting than the authorized because it's kind of that final step, and there's a couple of more hurdles. And then usually it goes through. Now, not always the case because if you may remember Starry Internet, which was one of the top 10, I think they were number 9, I believe, as far as potential money that they could have won. They were announced as ready to authorize. And then kind of at the last minute, they decided that they were not going to participate. That was because of financial issues. There were some changes, certainly in economics with them and with, in general, the cost of credit and the cost of buying things. So, and they're a fixed wireless provider, fixed wireless kind of fiber combination, but really a lot of fixed wireless. So, they decided to pull out. So, but now, we got Resound Networks, which is also a fixed wireless kind of combination fixed wireless and fiber provider. And providers like Starry and Resound, who had won this money, everybody in the top 10 had bid in the gigabit tier. So because of that, bidding in the gigabit tier, they have to do that with whatever technology they're going to use, in addition to being fixed wireless, if that's what they're going to use. So that can be a little bit more difficult, obviously, than fiber. So we see here we got most interesting thing on here is Usenet, which is a satellite provider. As I mentioned, the FCC came out and said that SpaceX's Starlink would not be awarded any funds, even though they had been selected and were in the top 10. They were up there in the top 10. The FCC came out as they reviewed applications and said that SpaceX would not be getting any money. Now, I think SpaceX has appealed that, and I don't think the decision on that has come down yet. But we've got Usenet here, which is also a satellite operator, and they generally have been known to be a geosynchronous satellite operator, not a low Earth orbit satellite operator like SpaceX. Geosynchronous, you're not going to get the same speeds that you are on a low Earth orbit satellite, and you're getting a much higher latency. So I'm thinking that they must have bid in a low Earth orbit kind of either that, they may have bid in the lowest speed and high latency category. You can see here that they won 2 states or 2 sections in Rhode Island, 2 census blocks, basically. Actually, 156 census block groups that they won. But they may have done it via looking at a low Earth orbit partnership that they have with OneWeb. They actually invested in OneWeb back in, I think it was January 2021, I believe, where they invested money in OneWeb, which is a low Earth orbit satellite operator that's been launching satellites. They're not as low as Starlink, so they don't need as many. They're planning on having, I think, 600 or so, 600 plus satellites in a constellation in orbit, whereas Starlink is looking at having 30,000, and that's going to include their first gen and second gen satellites in order to cover what they want to cover. So you can see here, Usenet is one of the winners. Then you've got Resound Networks, and it's a long document. I'll go ahead and link to again where you can download these documents. But you can see most of the pages. I'm going to scroll all the way down here, making you dizzy or nauseous. Here we go. So you can see it goes all the way down to Resound Networks, multiple states. So I always try to take this information and then go ahead and summarize it for you. There wasn't much to summarize this time since there were only 2 providers that won money. And you can see here, Usenet, the one state that they bid in was Rhode Island, and 156, as you can see, census block groups, 345 eligible census blocks in those census block groups. Total locations, you can see here about a little over 3,500 locations. And then they got pretty much the money that they had won in the auction that they're going to be getting in this. And that's 1.2 million approximately. And you can see that's $341 per location. So they don't have a lot to work with. So again, this is going to be satellite. This is going to help defray the costs in some way. I don't know if it'll be in the terminals that customers have to buy or how they're going to make this money, because it's not like, I guess they could put it towards launching more satellites that would be in the constellation to be able to help handle this. But in any event, it's $341, and that's over 10 years. So that's roughly $34 per location per year that they get. And then, of course, they kick in part of that as well. So not a lot of money to work with. Then you've got Resound Networks here. You can see many more locations. They've got these, 3, 6, 7 states. So you got, now I put Arkansas in here twice. So I put that on there twice by mistake. So 6 states: Arkansas, Colorado, Kansas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and Texas, unless there was another A state in there and I typed Arkansas twice by mistake. I can't remember. But 1,918 census block groups, 40,504 eligible census blocks in those groups, and then that comprises 217,582 locations. So those would be the actual broadband serviceable locations that they're going to cover. Now, how accurate is that number of locations? We know that the number of locations in various states is greater than what the broadband fabric had. And the broadband fabric would have been more accurate than what the FCC had access to when they were counting up broadband locations. So unless they were looking at the fabric numbers and coming up with this number of locations, they couldn't do that because Resound bid based on the number of locations. So it could well be that there's far more locations in these states, partially because of growth since the time when Resound and any other RDOF operators or winners bid, and the fact that we believe there are many more locations, broadband serviceable locations, than there were that the FCC had identified at the time that they did the RDOF auctions. So that'll be interesting. So you can see the numbers there, but again, you see the amount over 10 years per location is almost $1,400. So again, that's over 10 years, so about $140 per year of support that they're going to get through this money. This money is provided through USAC, through the USF funds. This is not money that we experience through a tax, other than if you consider the little RDOF or USF charge on your phone bill a tax. That's where that's coming from. So this is not something directly from federal income taxes or state taxes or anything like that. So I will again link to that information. And then also, these are the defaults here. You can see there weren't that many. You see Resound Networks did have one default In Texas, it was just one census block group, and it was about $30,000 or so that they defaulted there. And then a company called XIBER, Zyber maybe, like fiber, Zyber, I'm not sure how they pronounce that. They had a number of defaults as well. And then also the day prior, this was the authorized long-form applicants from a prior announcement of ready to authorize. So these folks I reported on at some point in the past that they were ready to authorize, and they have now been authorized. So that would be Gigabeam Networks and Pair Networks. So these guys were ready to authorize, and now they've gotten those final two hurdles passed of the letter of credit and the bankruptcy opinion letter. Those two things have been sent in, and the FCC has now said that they are authorized, and they will now be getting those funds. And we should see an authorized announcement about Resound Networks and Use Network here in the next several weeks once they get their final paperwork in. Again, unless somebody pulls out, or that would be the only thing I could think of. Like, let's say Resound decides that, you know what, we can't afford to do this, kind of like Starry did. Maybe they can't. They could possibly do that. I don't expect that, but we'd have to see. So we'd have the next step there, and they will be authorized. And then finally, I will link to this. This is the announcement for those couple of operators that were authorized right there. Again, this was on December 15th, the day before. So I'll link to that as well. So we can see that still seeing some funds coming out from the FCC on RDOF. I don't know what's left, honestly. There are probably some small announcement that they'll make, but as I said, all the top 10 now have received their funds. This was kind of one that we were all waiting on. So we'll have to see what happens if there's anybody else that is ready. This is all round one, phase one of RDOF. But the thing is, there's supposed to be a phase two. Whether there ever is a phase two remains to be seen, because we have a lot of money out there through the BEAD program that is just waiting to be released. So, and I'll be talking in a few days, I think, about kind of the timeline for BEAD and the maps and map challenges, and kind of where I think the timeline is going to go for when the real production map will be available, which will dictate or determine when funds will be available through BEAD, because they've got to use those maps to determine how much each state is going to get based on the unserved locations versus their state versus the rest of the country. So that'll be coming up soon in a broadcast, maybe tomorrow. I don't know. I haven't decided yet. So anyway, thanks for joining me. If this was helpful, if you'd give me a like on YouTube there, and subscribe. If you're not subscribed, click the subscribe button, click the little bell, and you'll be notified when I'm live. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.